What's going on, you guys? I decided to make one more trades video here before the deadline. I wanted to throw in a couple more players that I haven't talked about as much recently, and some guys I think are must-adds here before the deadline arrives. So today I've got my last video of the trade season for 2020. I think these players are guys you really need to go after and try to get on your teams because they're going to make a big difference come playoff time in fantasy, so they can have a huge impact on your team's success. As always, if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn that bell on to support SFS here and the channel so we can keep growing together. Let's not waste any more time, and let's get into my final trade targets. All right, one of my favorite guys here on the list that I have not talked about enough recently as a buy low candidate is Lamar Jackson, the Baltimore Ravens quarterback. Obviously, he was the 2019 NFL MVP, and this guy last week really impressed me against the Patriots in basically a monsoon. That game was terrible weather conditions, and he had every reason to struggle in that game, and I thought he still performed nicely. 250 yards passing and 2 touchdowns, along with the work he did on the ground. In a game against Bill Belichick in the elements, I thought he really weathered the storm nicely. And Lamar is simply just a guy right now whose stock is really low. He's only the QB9 in fantasy scoring right now. And in many people's eyes, he is definitely not producing up to the level they drafted him at this season. He was probably somewhere between a second and third round pick in your leagues and one of the top 2 quarterbacks taken off the board. So clearly not producing up to standards, but Lamar Jackson has had a very difficult season this year due to some tough matchups on that schedule. But things really open up here for him. He's got Dallas, Cleveland, Jacksonville, New York, and Cincinnati from now until week 17. So I think there's a lot of room for improvement. Lamar Jackson is going to get back to his 2019 form, or at least something very similar to that, and win a lot of fantasy leagues. I probably should have prefaced this at the beginning of the video, but not all of these players are guys that you can go out and buy for dirt cheap right now. You're going to have to pay a price to get some of these guys in your team, but I think their upside and the value they provide to you guys is far worth it. These guys can win you your championships. They can put you over the hump and really get you in the mix. So I think these guys, despite the high price, some of them are trending down a little bit right now, but they're going to command that price, and I think it's worth it the rest of the season. Especially now, with it being the trade deadline for a lot of leagues, you're not going to have the chance to go out and buy these players anymore, coming up very shortly here in just a few days. So with that being said, Derrick Henry is my next player up here, the running back for the Tennessee Titans. And simply put here, Derrick Henry has the easiest schedule for running backs in fantasy football during the fantasy playoffs, and that is the best time to have an easy schedule. Henry's last 2 games have him trending down. He's had some modest performances, only 6 and 11 points respectively in those 2 outings. But going forward, Derrick Henry is going to have monster games. And just the fact that he has Jacksonville, Detroit, and Green Bay alone in that 3-game stretch at the end of the year makes him worth an investment. This is a guy I would give up players like James Robinson, Todd Gurley, Josh Jacobs in a hurry to go out and get. I would give up a wide receiver too with those players as well. And I think that Derrick Henry is a top 5 running back play in the fantasy playoffs, if not top 3. So he needs to be sought after. You guys need to make an offer for him. This guy can make a difference in your league. My next guy up here, Miles Sanders, I have talked about plenty this season. I was all over him in draft season, and I really liked him the entire stretch of the way this year. Coming into week 11, he had a very nice performance and was highly efficient against the Giants, who are no slouch of a run defense in their own right. But Miles Sanders still averaged over 5.5 yards per carry, and he just had a little bit unlucky play of the cards in that game. Boston Scott ended up going for a 56-yard touchdown. I thought he clearly stepped out of bounds, and they should have kept that possession, but the refs didn't see it somehow. He got the score, and so Miles Sanders didn't get one there. And then Corey Clement got a 5-yard touchdown run. Who knows why he was in the game, but Doug Peterson needs to get himself together. Give Miles Sanders the ball more. That offense is sputtering right now and turning the football over like crazy. This guy is the answer to that offense's problems. Miles Sanders looks like he's on another level. That guy is so talented. He has very dynamic traits and skills. He can run the ball very efficiently and receive the football as well if Carson Wentz would stop overthrowing him. So Miles Sanders is a player you guys need to go out and get. He is a top 6 to 7 running back play the rest of the season. My next guy up here is DeAndre Swift. I think this was certainly a guy to buy earlier in the season when his stock was down. It's definitely trending up right now. after that huge performance in his first career start. But despite the rise in price, you guys still need to go out and target Swift. This is simply one of the most versatile and dynamic backs in the NFL. And if you guys have been sticking with me throughout this season, you know I like to rave about my running backs that get receiving work in the passing game, and DeAndre Swift is probably one of the more elite guys in that asset of the game. Simply just being a rookie, DeAndre Swift has already proven that he is one of the most explosive players after the catch in the NFL, and I think going forward, that trait is going to help him tremendously. He is going to continue to put up elite numbers. This guy has already proven that he can pass the matchup test. Last week against the Washington football team, who has a great front seven, he was still able to produce very good fantasy numbers, both through the air and on the ground. Swift was also able to find the end zone, which is a huge production booster as well. And I think going forward, he has a very nice schedule. He does have Tampa in the championship game, I believe. But DeAndre Swift, like I said, so versatile and dynamic. I think that he is good enough to overcome the matchup. If you guys are deep at wide receiver, I would be willing to pay a significant price there to get DeAndre Swift on my lineup. Maybe not a top-end wide receiver one, but a guy like Adam Thielen and Rojo in a package. Maybe some sort of combination of players like Calvin Ridley or Tyler Lockett, who are both guys I like. I would still be willing to part with to get a guy like Swift on my team. Austin Ekeler is another guy who is being highly slept on right now, and I think you guys have the perfect opportunity to go buy super low for a RB1 the rest of the season, especially in PPR formats. That hamstring strain has really brought Ekeler's value down because he hasn't played in weeks. And right now, we've seen that entire LA backfield be hit by injuries. Justin Jackson has landed on the IR, and Joshua Kelly has been less effective and relevant in that offense. So we're seeing Kalen Ballage be the lead back for that guy. Tremaine Pope is also struggling with injuries. So Austin Ekeler is going to be a saving grace for that offense when he comes back. He is going to be used highly and effectively. He's going to get lots of passing work, and he's going to be used on the ground as well. His expected return date is Week 12 against Buffalo, and then moving forward down the stretch, he has some really nice matchups and a very favorable playoff schedule. So Austin Ekeler is a guy I really like here at the deadline, and I think you can pick up for fairly cheap. I apologize to those of you guys who are regulars here on the channel because you have listened to me ramble and rant about Aaron Jones over and over again, probably 2 or 3 times a week in my videos. But one more time in Trade Talks, I will discuss Aaron Jones and the value I think he holds the rest of this season. In PPR leagues, in standard leagues, it doesn't matter. I see Aaron Jones as a top 5 running back play the rest of the season and a guy who makes a huge difference in the outcome of your leagues. Aaron Jones, while he is in somewhat of a committee in Green Bay with Jamal Williams, still sees roughly 15 to 20 touches regardless of matchup every single game. Since he returned from that calf strain, Jones has been a little bit rusty, but he has been highly effective before that point, and I think that he's going to be coming back to full health here, and Green Bay's schedule opens up really nice here down the stretch after this week against the Colts, but that's not even a matchup I'd be too concerned about. Derrick Henry just had 100 yards on them last week, and despite them being a very sound unit defensively, the run game does seem to be their weak spot. And Aaron Jones has a very good offensive line that I think can lead the way for him. So he's a guy I really like the rest of the season. Like I said, top 5 numbers are to be expected from him going forward. I think Aaron Jones is a league winner. And with those 2 quiet games the last couple weeks against San Fran and Jacksonville, Aaron Jones should have a slight dip in his price on the trade market. Finally, getting into some wide receivers here, A.J. Brown is my first guy up, and one of the best opportunities I think there is out there to buy low for a wide receiver one the rest of this season. A.J. Brown, who is coming off of a rough outing against the Colts last week that I predicted 1 catch for 21 yards. He's causing some owners some panic, and for a guy who has 2 difficult matchups coming up after that, he has the Ravens this week and then the Colts again the following week. I think owners might start to be getting scared here and looking to sell Brown while they still can. But I think while he might have some down games in that stretch, A.J. Brown is definitely a wide receiver one the rest of the way and a guy who can put up top-end numbers. In terms of fantasy points scored on a per-game basis, I forget the exact stat off the top of my head, but A.J. Brown is among the top in the NFL in terms of that statistical category. In the games he suited up, very few players have scored more points in terms of fantasy on a per game basis. And so A.J. Brown is a guy with a massive ceiling. We've seen this guy have really big games on very limited volume, and he is a must-own player in all scoring formats. Like I said, due to his matchups and some panicking owners, I think there is a very real market out there for A.J. Brown and a realistic way to go about getting him on your teams. Another very interesting route to go about here at the trade deadline is to go out and acquire Mark Andrews, the Ravens tight end. I think this is a guy who is skyrocketing in value right now. Mark Andrews has everything going for him in fantasy. Like Lamar Jackson, very similar situation, obviously, as they are on the same team. These guys have been playing good defenses all year, and things start to finally open up here. Andrews has been one of the top fantasy tight ends this year and last, and he doesn't even technically start. Nick Boyle is the official starting tight end for the Ravens roster, but he just suffered a season-ending injury against the Patriots. He got rolled up on and suffered a leg injury. So now Mark Andrews is going to see even more playing time and the field even more in that Ravens offense. I think that means more targets, more receptions, and more touchdowns for Andrews. Just like for Lamar Jackson, Dallas, Cleveland, Jacksonville, New York, and Cincinnati are all great games for him. And I think he has some very productive outings those weeks. Mark Andrews is my favorite tight end to go buy the rest of the season before your trade deadlines. Go out and make an offer for him if you have some depth. He can return great value. Another under-the-radar wide receiver to go out and target for your teams here at the trade deadline is Will Fuller, the Texans' #1 wideout. And this is a guy who has a really nice connection with his quarterback, Deshaun Watson. D-Watt relies on Will Fuller similarly to how he relied on D-Hop when he was still a member of the Texans organization. And I think that Will Fuller, being an extremely talented wideout, has been able to avoid the main thing that has caused struggles for him in fantasy and in his actual NFL career, and that is injuries. Will Fuller has remained healthy all season long, and we have seen the numbers he's put up in result of that. 6 touchdowns in his last 7 games, and this guy is a borderline wide receiver 1 right now. He's entered into must-start territory for wideouts in fantasy football, despite some difficult matchups here down the stretch. I think Will Fuller is a cheaper guy that a lot of players don't value the way he should be. And I think there's opportunities to go snatch him up and have a very sneaky play on your roster the rest of the season. Will Fuller definitely isn't considered as a top-tier wide receiver in the NFL yet, but he can definitely provide those top-tier numbers week to week in your fantasy lineups. So I'd look to go out and get him. Like I said, I think that price is lower than other guys with the same production as him just because of that name value. And I think Will Fuller is a great asset for your teams, so you guys should go out and try and get him. My second to last guy to go out and target here at the deadline is Allen Robinson, the Chicago Bears' #1 wideout. And simply put, this guy is as reliable as it gets in PPR scoring and is one of the most consistent and reliable players in that scoring. When you talk about dependability in fantasy football, 2 names come to mind at the wide receiver position, Allen Robinson and Robert Woods. I just talked about Robert Woods in a past video this week, and I think Allen Robinson is an even better option to go about here. Right now, his stock is down a little bit because of the injury to Nick Foles, and obviously Trubisky is not a great option, but he's actually injured as well. So Tyler Bray, I believe is his name for the Bears, is the next man up, but Chicago is in a bye week right now, so hopefully someone is able to get healthy for that team. But nonetheless, Allen Robinson is still going to get his looks despite who is at quarterback for the Chicago offense. Robinson on Monday Night Football in a game that many would consider a down performance and a little bit of a quiet game for him, still had 9 PPR points in fantasy because he racks up those receptions. Not too many yards for him, but he was able to haul in 5 catches, so he still has a floor that is very sustainable. And then when you take a look at Robinson's playoff schedule, he has Houston, Minnesota, and Jacksonville. This is as good as it gets for wide receivers in fantasy football the rest of the season. Similarly to Derrick Henry, that schedule gives him great upside and potential going forward here, so you guys need to go after him. I think Allen Robinson has the potential in those games to put up huge numbers and win some weeks for you guys. I don't think he is an all-out league winner, but he is definitely a guy that can contribute to the cause and be a great staple in your lineup. And then lastly here, Michael Thomas. If you guys want to talk about a fantasy player that has seen his value plummet through the floor throughout the course of this season, Michael Thomas is the prime example for that. This guy was a top-end first-round pick in some PPR leagues and was probably a fantasy community-wide first-round pick. I think Michael Thomas was probably most people's wide receiver 1s coming into this season. I had him ranked as my wide receiver 2. And right now, he's like wide receiver 130 something because he hasn't played games this year. And the games that he has played, he hasn't produced very nicely. He's had some tough matchups against teams like Tampa Bay and last week San Fran. But I think he starts to get back on track here. MT has had a couple weeks to shake off the dust now. I think Jameis Winston coming into that offense actually helps his fantasy value as well because the average depth of targets in that offense is going to increase with him at the helm. More down the field passes are going to be thrown with Winston as opposed to Breeze. And I think Michael Thomas and Emmanuel Sanders are very big beneficiaries of that. In the past, Michael Thomas has been a PPR monster, and 2 back-to-back seasons, he was a great option in lineups. I don't think that you just drop off a cliff at age 27 and just all of a sudden become an irrelevant fantasy player. This guy still has the talent to get it done. He still has the pedigree to be an elite fantasy player, and Sean Payton is no fool. He is going to get Michael Thomas involved in that offense and use him as a safety blanket for young quarterback Jameis Winston, who has had his turnover issues. And then my last case for Thomas here, his rest of season schedule, I would say is arguably almost as good, if not better, than Allen Robinson's. He has Atlanta, Denver, Atlanta again, Philadelphia, and Minnesota in the championship game. These are all matchups that Michael Thomas can eat against, rack up 10, 12 receptions like we've seen him do in the past, and be a very elite option. Obviously, Michael Thomas has his risks right now because we haven't seen him produce once this season, but the talent is still there, and I have to believe that he is still going to produce at a high level. So he's got some risk, but in my opinion, he's a must-own player and a guy to target here at the deadline. Those were my final fantasy football trade targets for the 2020 season. That was my last bit of trade advice to you guys as I send you into the trade deadline here for this year's NFL action. Thank you guys so much for coming along with me throughout the journey so far. I can't wait to make a playoff push with y'all and see how far we can go in the playoffs. So thank you again so much for watching as always. If you have any questions, make sure to put those in the comment section down below. I'm happy to answer as many of you guys as I can get to, and I love helping you guys out and contributing to your fantasy teams. So thank you guys so much for watching and all of your support. I really enjoy watching this channel and community grow, and I cannot wait for what we have in store the rest of the season. So until next time, I'll see you guys later. Peace out.